Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Environment Select meeting. Hope it goes all right. Obviously I like to do them in 2 hours, but I look at this meeting, I've got not much chance, but we'll do our endeavour to do our best. Apologies. Do we have any apologies first, Simon?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor McGrath, Councillor Walters, and Councillor Jacob, but Councillor Jacob may join the meeting later.
Just introduce myself. For those that don't know, I'm Councillor Jerry Cantler, Chairman of Environment Select. And my man on my right is Councillor Bob Jones, and he's my Vice Chairman, very able man as well. So, good. Right, we have other members here. So do we have any declarations of interest? And I have to start with the fact that we've got 2 written questions submitted, one of these which relates to the minutes of the last meeting. So I'm going to therefore suggest that we reorder the agenda and come to the minutes on the previous meeting after we have covered declarations of interest and public participation in that order. Okay, thank you. And fine. All in favour of that? Yep. Right. So now we come to the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, disclosable interest, dispensations as granted by the Standards Committee? There are none. Public participation. Right, we have 2 written questions from Mr. Campbell Ritchie, submitted and circulated along with the responses. So welcome, Campbell. I have spoken to you on the phone a couple of times and you're going to be able to speak in a second. If, as he's here, so the Chairman, Councillor Nabil Najjar, Portfolio Holder for Arts, Heritage and Tourism, has, following the meeting of the Environment Select Committee on the 4th of January this year, asked me to read out a statement clarifying the following comments from officers regarding the Malmesbury Heritage Trail app and putting this on the record. A statement was made that the Explore Malmesbury Web Act was developed by the University of Winchester. There was confusion over who was responsible for the web app. We wish to confirm that the app belongs to Malmesbury Town Team CIC, Explore Malmesbury, has been created in and is operated as the result of a large voluntary community effort led by Malmesbury Town Team, linking many local groups, including the Town Council, Athelston Museum, Civic Trust, Warden and Freeman, and a large number of volunteers. Officers had thought from their conversations with Malmesbury that Sprecken Limited, also Wiltshire-based, were closely tied to the University of Winchester. We wish to confirm that this is not the case. The app was developed and is technically supported by a commercial business, Sprecken Limited. Students at the University of Winchester produce some augmented reality content for the app as part of their coursework. A statement was made that the cost of the Explore Malmesbury web app for each town would be a minimum of £10,000 per town, and Explore Malmesbury is vastly more expensive than Calvium. We also wish to clarify that the £10,000 discussed cost was for an optional TV and video development within the app. We can confirm that Malmesbury Town Team has not been invited to quote for the development or supply of the Wiltshire Heritage Trails app against any requirement specification. We therefore cannot provide any comparison of costs between developing the original Calvium supplied Salisbury app or the Explore Malmesbury Web Act, and we had no basis to report to the committee that the cost of the Explore Malmesbury Web App for each town would be a minimum of £10,000 per town, or that Explore Malmesbury is vastly more expensive. Nevertheless, officers reviewed the functionality of a number of solutions at length and concluded that a native app provides substantial advantages over a web-based model, not least, in our view, the ability to make use of mobile functionality, store content on the app, and not require constant mobile connectivity due to the GPS, which is an advantage across our more rural communities. This is therefore excluded Explore Malmesbury from our further supply consideration. A statement was then made that the content on Explore Malmesbury is delivered by Winchester and has no flexibility, and what you see is what you get. and although material can be added, it isn't very straightforward. The officers involved in the Trails app programme have a high regard for the Malmesbury web app and the work and outreach undertaken around it. We recognise that the content is adaptable and material can be added by local teams. This is one of the several apps reviewed by officers along with the Corsham Trails, which were highlighted to illustrate the variation in approaches. We recognise that content can add flexibility. That is the end of Councillor Najir's statement. And the second question from Mr Ritchie requests that the minutes of the previous meeting on the 4th of January be amended. This is set out and written in question and circulated as Agenda Supplement 1. And the relevant paragraph in the draft minutes is at the top of page 8, item 6 of your agenda pack. So do you think I should let Mr Campbell make a statement now? Yeah, okay. So, Mr Campbell, welcome. If you have a supplementary or a statement.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my name is Campbell Ritchie. I'm Chair of Malmesbury Town Team. I'm also a Malmesbury Town Councillor. Malmesbury Town Team is a community interest company, as you've heard. In other words, it's a limited company working for the benefit of the community. It's entirely voluntary, and our role is to promote local businesses in our high street in particular and to promote Malmesbury. We work in partnership with Malmesbury Town Council. We've developed Explore Malmesbury to be an innovative and successful digital multimedia guide to Malmesbury. It tells the stories of Malmesbury at the places it happened and includes points of information, trails and lots of other Explore treats. And creating and operating Explore Malmesbury, as you've heard, has been a huge community effort linking the Town Team, Museum, Civic Trust, Warden and Freeman, Abbey and lots of other organisations and individuals. The capital elements were publicly funded through EU grant plus local grants, and it's sustained through activities such as our guided walks. And please do take one of the leaflets there and you can QR code directly into Explore Malmesbury. We also pulled an awful lot of expertise, local experts on mapping, academics from the University of Winchester and our professional suppliers. It might not be perfect and we've learned a lot, many lessons on the way, but we're very proud of it. We remain disappointed that our offers to work collaboratively with Wiltshire Council on the development of the Wiltshire Heritage app have been rebuffed at every step. However, if all you heard about Explore Malmesbury was the presentation by officers on the development of the Wiltshire Heritage app at your last meeting, you would have heard the comments that were quoted there, that the app was developed by the University of Winchester, that the cost for each town is a minimum of £10,000, the content has no flexibility and what you see is what you get, and although the material can be added, it's not very straightforward, and it's vastly more expensive than the app that Wiltshire Council has chosen. You would have had a really poor impression of Explore Malmesbury. But as you've already heard from each of those, from the statement that's just been read out on behalf of the portfolio holder, is each of these statements is false. We remain mystified why they were made. They were certainly damaging to the reputation of Explore Malmesbury and to its future commercial potential. We are therefore very pleased the record is being put straight for you and onto the public record today. It's then your choice if you want to examine what work has really gone on to make the decision to progress with the Salisbury Trail app model for the Wiltshire Heritage app. But we would also respectfully ask you to consider if, in view of the statement you've just heard from Councillor Nadja, that you will review the minutes of your previous meeting so that they are amended as we have proposed in our question 2 to this committee. Finally, we've had it confirmed by Councillor Nadja that the Wiltshire Heritage Centre will be pleased to support Explore Malmesbury in developing future content, and the Wiltshire Council does intend to promote Explore Malmesbury through the Heritage app. We have asked that it could be confirmed that Malmesbury will feature as one of the first editions alongside the first 10 Heritage app towns, but this confirmation has not yet been received. We would ask that this committee supports us in this request if for some reason it is not otherwise forthcoming. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So there is a slight supplementary question. That is a very nice statement you've given us, and thank you for giving your time to us. I just need to take a bit of advice. Kieran, the gentleman's asked possibly for an amendment of the minutes, but unless I throw this to members, which way do you think we should take this? Because you're the legal man.
Not legal, but procedural, Chair, but thank you. So it is entirely up to the committee to approve the minutes of its own meetings. You have the draft minutes as they've been circulated with the agenda. I don't believe any of the specific points that were raised are actually in the minutes of that meeting. So you may feel that the fact that the statement you've just made on behalf of Councillor Najjar and the clarifications, which will be in the minutes for this meeting, are sufficient. We could also include a statement on the page for that meeting to direct people that there is a statement on the minutes of this meeting. However, if there is a specific addition or change that members want to propose, they could do that under the minutes item, and that could be voted on. But they would need to be specific about which words to remove, which words to add, and so forth. So you are able to, but it's whether you feel that's necessary in light of the statement, which will be minuted.
Well, I'm reluctant to change minutes. I think that before the thing, and if you're happy as we are at this stage, and if there's any other members here who want to make a comment on this, Councillor Matthew, yes.
I was just going to suggest that perhaps we could ask if Councillor Ritchie would be accepting of your suggestion, or if he would think it more appropriate that the minutes are changed. I think it's important we hear from him.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. I'll say, I have been in negotiations. I have been trying everything I can in the last few days to try and resolve this. And like I say, a minute changing is quite complicated. If you're happy with that, I'll just let you.
Thank you. I don't want to take too much of the committee's time. If the committee is prepared to take the route that's been suggested by the officer, which I think is to record on the minute that there is an additional statement and point towards the statement, then I think that would be perfectly adequate. Thank you.
Happy to do that. Thank you very much for attending as well. Okay. Right. So now then, come to the next bit then, is to approve the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on January, it was a long time ago, January the 4th. So can I have a proposal for the minutes, please?
And that is
With the comments made today, and it in, yeah? With a note to say there'll be a statement with those clarifications. Right, okay, can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. All those in favour? Right, minutes approved, thank you. Right, Chairman's announcements. I will be fairly brief. That firstly, I'd like to welcome Councillors Tom Rounds and Tony Trotman to the selection committee. Committee, welcome your new members. They've replaced Bill Parks and Councillor Rich Rogers. I'd like to thank those for all the hard work they've done in the past, and wish them all the best in their new roles. And we also welcome Ellen, Democratic Services Officer, who'll be supporting the select committees. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ellen?
Hi everyone. There's a lot of faces. So yeah, my name's Ellen. I'm a Democratic Services Officer, have been for 3 years. Used to look after Health Select, but I've come to paddy around with you guys now, so excited to look forward with you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Sounds like we'll have a good partnership. Right. Okay, welcome. So recent meetings, I'll bring the Select Committee up to date with the meetings I have attended in my capacity as the Chairman of the Environment Select Committee. Since the 4th, I've attended on the 17th of January, forward work planning meeting with the Cabinet member and regarding housing. 19th and 20th of January, financial planning task group, the budget meetings. 24th of January, overview and scrutiny management committee. 27th of January, financial planning task group. And on the 7th of February, overview and scrutiny management committee. I have received briefings on the following. 23rd of January, activity to address recycling contamination. Now we can move to the main part of the agenda. And here we go straight away. We have to request that we move item 8, the Wiltshire Design Statement Guide, to the end of the agenda, as the Cabinet member is currently in another meeting and he will be coming later. So if you're all happy with that, I'm sorry about that, but it is important that we have Nick Bottrell here. So I'm going to take item 6, which is the Highways Annual Review of Service. Item 6, and it pages 13 to 70, and we're going to introduce our Councillor Caroline Thomas, our new Cabinet Member for Transport, Street, Scene and Flooding. And I believe this is your first Select Committee meeting, and therefore welcome you. And I think we've got Parvis Samantha Knowles and Dave Thomas. So I'll let you take it.
Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to introduce the Highways Annual Review of Service for 2022. Obviously, this is a review of the performance of the highway service during the year, which includes an update on the performance of the contractors and suppliers involved. I would just like to flag that we are acutely aware that there is an increased risk of accidents, claims and public dissatisfaction if the programme of highway maintenance and related services are not delivered effectively or are delayed. And indeed, future DFT funding is dependent on demonstrating the application of good practice and asset management principles. And that's really what this report is all about, demonstrating. I would like to flag just a few points, if that's okay. The first to flag that, we did extend the Ringway contract through to April of this year, but we are now in a move across to Milestone, and that's covered in some detail, and I'm sure the ins and outs of that will be included. So there has been a demobilisation and a mobilisation phase, which obviously does have some impact in terms of activity. Key to say that performance, in most aspects has been rated good, but we are acutely aware that the summer, hot summer, and the winter of freeze temperatures followed by lots of rain, followed by more freeze temperatures, has had a material impact on the condition of many roads. And when we combine that also with the impact of inflation, we clearly have a position where we've not perhaps been able to do as much as we've had more to do. And because of inflation, we've not been able to do quite as much as we would like to do. And I just think that's an important point to note going forward. Inflation is not going to go away. It's very high. And particularly when many of our funding is capital funding and doesn't increase inflation, that has an inevitable consequence. We're very mindful of that. And lastly, I'd just like to flag LHFIGs. So LHFIGs were introduced, I believe, as a result of conversations at Environment Select previously. So they were introduced in April 22, doubling of the budget, wider remit, but we know we have had some difficulties there, primarily linked to the ability to recruit officers to actually support the work. We are very aware of this, and it is something that we are planning to pick up as part of a review process later this year. So just while flagging those 3 points, I'd like to hand over to Dave.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So the documents that you have in front of you today, you have the covering report, and then at Appendix 1, you have the annual review of the Highways Service for 2022. I don't intend to go through that in a great deal of detail today. There's a lot of content in that report. There's a lot of figures in there. I hope that you find the time to absorb that and make the most of it. At Appendix 2, we have the list of schemes that have been achieved during 2022. And at Appendix 3, we have the updated performance management framework. So I thought just pick up a few points of detail, and I'll start off with the performance management framework. There are 2 items in there that have flagged up this time round as red flags to us. One is the skid resistance across the network overall is showing a decline compared to previous years. So that acts as a good pointer to us in looking at future years' maintenance works. We need to do a little bit more to try and address the skid resistance properties across the network. The second item that's flagging as red is the proportion of reactive maintenance against planned maintenance activity. And as Caroline has alluded to, that's probably a reflection of the fact that during the hot summer and over the winter period, we've had to do a lot more reactive work rather than actually planning the work. Ideally, we would be looking to have reactive works around about 15% of the overall budget compared to the planned works. It's much better that we do a planned approach, but unfortunately, we've had to react to circumstances. I do feel that this time next year, doing this report, we might find ourselves in an even worse position in terms of having to do an awful lot more reactive work following the bad weather that we've had during January, February of this year, which will be reflected in the 2023 report. So I just flag that for your information at this stage. Sticking with the performance management framework, I would advise the committee that we will be reviewing the content and the presentation of the performance management framework for next year. That's in reflection of the fact that we introduced the performance management framework in response to the DFT's requirement for incentive funding in a few years ago. DFT advised us last year that they would be changing the criteria for the incentive funding for this forthcoming financial year. Unfortunately, at this point in time, I can report that we've had no contact from DFT telling us what our capital settlements are or what the detail of those changes to the incentive funding are going to be. The initial indication was that the incentive funding would actually move more towards looking at active travel activities, and we would need to change our performance management framework to match that. So again, just to say that this is the last time that this performance management framework will be presented in the format that you see it today. We will look to review it and update it in time for next year. So turning to the annual review overall, just a few points to pick up on. The first one is external impacts. Caroline has alluded to the fact that we've had some resource issues across the highways. It's not just us, it's our contractors and our consultants that we use. There's a national shortage of qualified engineering staff, and we're carrying a fair number of vacancies within the structure, and that has impacted particularly on the LHVIGs, as Caroline has mentioned. In response to that, we have tried to alter the way in which we've done recruitment. We've taken a more targeted approach through our HR colleagues, and we keep trying to move that forward to get the right kind of calibre of staff to come and work for us. In the longer term, we've also invested considerably in apprentices. We're at the forefront within the council of running an apprenticeship programme. Our apprenticeship programme is fully affiliated to the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I'm pleased to advise you that we've had 2 of our apprentices go through the whole process, complete their degrees and become professionally qualified through the Institution of Civil Engineers. So in terms of growing our own, we're doing our best, but it is a 5-year programme of getting an apprentice in the door and getting them through that process. So in the longer term, I think that we'll do well. Our apprentices are proving to be very worthwhile. They all seem to be quite willing to work hard and stay with the council, which is a key ingredient for us. But as I say, getting hold of plug and play, if you like, people who are fully qualified is proving to be an ongoing challenge. Other challenges during the course of the year have been around some materials availability. In the early part of 2022, it was virtually impossible to get hold of street lighting columns. Steel was in short supply. Costs of steel of lighting columns doubled in price virtually overnight, and suppliers weren't able to give us guarantees of when deliveries would take place or even how much we'd be paying for them. Because the effects of inflation, they'd only hold the price for a short period of time, and they wouldn't give us commitments. So that was the worst case scenario, but materials generally, cement-based products have been were in short supply in early 2022. That seems to have resolved itself now. Most materials are generally available. As you know, most of our all of our contracts are related to construction indices rather than retail price index. So they're specialist indices to do with construction activities. We've seen inflation pressures varying from 4.21% up to 16.75% during the course of the year. Those inflationary figures have continued to rise during January, February, but they do seem to have peaked in the last month, and the last overall construction indices figure that I'm aware of, it's dropped by 0.05%. So a very small amount, not really reflected in the rates that we pay at the moment. So in terms of dealing with those inflationary rises, as Caroline has mentioned, our budgets within highways are fairly fixed. And so we've had to absorb those inflationary pressures within existing budgets. So overall, during 2022, we've probably absorbed around about £900,000 worth of inflationary costs within the budgets. So I've mentioned staff resource. Caroline mentioned a little earlier the change to LH Figs. So CatG's changed to LH Figs in April last year. There have been some difficulties dealing with the overall workload coming out of the LH Figs, but that will be looked at as part of the 12-month review of operation of the LH Figs, and that will be brought forward to a further meeting of this group, date to be agreed. And finally, I wanted to finish on the new term civils contract that we have. Our current contractor, Ringway, have done a sterling job for the last 7 years. The new contract, after much work last year, was awarded to Milestone in November. We've been working with Milestone since that time with a mobilisation period. We're about to go live in a couple of weeks' time. During that same period, we've been working with Ringway on a demobilisation work as well to help so that we get continuity over this changeover period. We've tried to do our very best so that the decline of one contract and the start of the next contract doesn't impact on the service that we provide. I think we've managed that reasonably well. There are some areas that I think, in hindsight, we could have done a little bit better with, but overall, I'm generally satisfied with how we've managed that process. A changeover from one contractor to another is a big thing for us within the highways service. There's an awful lot of work to be done, specifically around looking after the existing Ringway workforce, the majority of whom will be covered by the TUPE regulations, so they have got the opportunity to transfer to the new provider. I'm very pleased to say that most of the operatives have taken that opportunity, and so we will have continuity with the workforce, which I think is a very important thing for us. So that's all for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's a great report, and I'd like to say pay tribute to Ringway for the years they've done and served for us, and good luck to the new company that come along. So I'm going to open this to the public. Relating, and thank you, Caroline, the LH Figs, I still like to call it CatG, but LH Figs is getting there. I noticed that we've rolled the funding over this year into the next financial year and I think that's going to have to something we're going to have to do regularly on every year, because some of the works, and you were saying about the pressures of getting the jobs done and the ordering, some of these works we put in process can take to 10 months to 12 months to get in place and get sorted. So that's something we may need to consider in the future. Now I'm going to throw it open to any members of the public. Yeah, I've got Tony. Tony's got his hand up, so you can go first, then Mr. Matthew, you can go second, then I'll look for other hands.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions, and I know you only like us to speak once, so I might roll that into a couple. I have read, and whether you believe it or not, the government may be funding, there is extra funding for us to bid for the sea roads and village routes. I just read that on Sunday, and I thought, great, I hope you'll be putting a bid in for that and looking at that. Also, on your major constructions, I'm Carnshire, Vester and Abbott division member, And I see you've got, a huge amount of work to do, and what has been done in the past has been excellent. But now moving forward on issues like on Dauncey Bank, obviously, which I had considered that was Highways England, but apparently that's our little Wiltshire's problem. But we have other problems in our town, and it's not on the list, but I wish you would just add that to the list, that the Calne Chilvester to bypass on the A3102 has been collapsing frequently ever since it's been built. There has been work done, but it is a dangerous sort of part of it where it's likely that articulated lorries could uncouple. It was almost as bad as that down by the Tesco supermarket, which was reinstated but collapsing again. Please add that to your list because many of our residents, are on all of our councillors' backs for that particular item. And it's just a point, and I hear that you're moving away from Ringway, which over the years has been our major workforce, if you like. I'm not sure of the reasons why you're moving to Milestone, but can I judge that even coming today across the Melksham bypass from Melksham to the Sumington roundabout, the new road surfaces that have been overlaid to actually cover the cracks and whatever are starting to break up already, just within a few months. And I know the weather pattern has not been good, but really the contractor has got to come back and sort that out. So there are issues right the way through that we are all concerned about. And although it's good to see what we have here, we must move forward to be able to sort of sort all those problems out. But thank you, Chairman. I'm sure others would like to have a speak. I try not to be parochial, but in this particular instance, I have been. So thank you for listening to me. But if you can add it to the list through our cabinet member, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trotman. As a new member, I will let you off on that one being parochial. Okay, just remember next time. Councillor Matthew.
Thank you. I was going to be ashamedly parochial in that I wanted to mention the parish stewards, who you can argue are parochial, but it's not a parochial discussion. Really good to hear that there is an attempt to ensure that staff are moving across. Obviously, it's vital to keep the institutional memory going. And hopefully to keep the morale going with that. So hopefully we'll be assured that that will happen.
Yes, I can categorically say that the parish steward service will continue under the new contract. It's one of the headline events, if you like, of the new contract. The vehicles, the parish steward service, will be branded slightly differently than the main contract vehicles, because we recognise the importance of the parish steward service and how valued they are in the community. The parish stewards themselves are the kind of frontline service, and we want to use them for both intelligence gathering and for distribution of information as to how we're doing. So yes, very much we'll be keeping them. Most of the guys that provide that service are the ones that will be transferring across, so that continuity will be continued.
Councillor Murray.
Oh, no, okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. So it seems that, keeping up is weather is a major component, and obviously being influenced by climate and getting worse. So, and you may tell me in answer to this question that it doesn't all sit with maintenance. I'm sure it doesn't. It sits with the LTP and everything else. But I was looking at Highways England's response to climate change on its network, and it talks about taking action on drainage, earthworks, stability, waterlogging, surface deterioration, heat affecting asphalt, pavements, bridges, etc. And all of these problems are going to increase, obviously, with the inevitable impacts. And it also talks about the things it's doing to hit net zero. So things like its net zero construction program, bio asphalt, low carbon concrete, all sorts of measures being taken. So I was wondering what's Wiltshire Council planning to do in order to start mitigating these impacts and doing its net zero planning, which is in its climate strategy. How's that reflected in these maintenance contracts? And how have the contractors performed in doing what you've asked them to do so far in these things? Thank you.
Certainly one of the drivers for the new term maintenance contract was the requirement to be carbon net zero by 2030. The traditional way in which we've assessed contracts is just with two categories, quality and price. And the quality submission has always been around the level of performance that the contractor is prepared to offer us. This time round, the scoring matrix that we used and the criteria set out in the contract, actually we had a specific section of the contract dealing just with carbon net zero. The first year of the milestone contract will all be about benchmarking and setting a standard to which we can measure against. But certainly by 2030, we would expect carbon net zero to have been achieved. There are some easy, quick wins that are fairly obvious that the contractor can take, such as moving his fleet of vehicles to electric power rather than internal combustion engines. The plant that he's using, even the hand tools that he's using on the ground, can all go to battery power rather than ICU units. But there's other things that he can look at in terms of overall mileage of the fleet, better utilisation and planning of reactive events to try and decrease the overall mileage that the teams are needing to cover to get to the places that they need to get to do the work that they're being asked to do. Milestone as a company overall have demonstrated a clear understanding of the requirements of carbon net zero, and nationally they're already benchmarking and measuring themselves against that. We've been talking to them about having some Power BI dashboards that demonstrate the progress that we will make across the whole highways service. And in fact, some of the lessons learnt from dealing with the milestone contract, we're looking to roll those out across our other highways contracts as well. So in terms of meeting the council's overall 2030 deadline for carbon net zero, I feel comfortable that we're on the right track. I'm not claiming that we would know everything about everything. I think we're all still at the very early stages of a fairly steep learning curve with carbon net zero. And I think that there's a lot of technological improvements to come along that will help us achieve that. In terms of network resilience, it's very difficult with limited budgets. We have to work with the budgets that are available to us. We have to do the best that we can. It's not just, as you've alluded to, not just a matter of resurfacing carriageways, and it's actually looking after drainage. One of the biggest issues that we have is standing water on the carriageway, water absorbing into the carriageway surface through cracks, that water then freezing, thawing, and making things worse. We need to make sure that our drainage infrastructure is as good as it can get so that we can get water away from the carriageway. So we are doing our very best on that, but it's getting a balance with all the different strands of work that we have to do. And with a limited fixed budget, we do the best that we can. But yes, it's a battle.
Thank you for that, Dave. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, by you, Chairman, to Dave. How you mentioned active transport as being a key thing coming forward. How can we get involved locally and influence via area boards and LH Think groups and other smaller groups to utilise the sort of the power of active transport?
I think you're talking about active travel. Yeah. So across the county, colleagues in the transport planning side of the department are developing LC WIPs, local cycling walking infrastructure plans. Those plans seek to identify the locations where we can deliver active travel schemes, and then hopefully, as and when we're able to bid for funding to DFT, we can then get the appropriate funding to allow delivery of that. Now, at the moment, we have LC WIPs in place for Salisbury and Trowbridge and Chippenham. The other conurbations are being worked on at the moment, and it's through that process that those active travel infrastructure schemes will be delivered. Alongside the actual kind of engineering type solutions, we have engaged with colleagues in leisure services and in public health to try and encourage that mindset shift that will encourage the residents of Wiltshire to adopt active travel as I'm not going to say the default way in which they should travel around the place, because we are a rural county, but where possible, we would like to encourage those kind of active travel activities, either walking and cycling. And so there are initiatives underway to cover that. I don't know if, Sam, if you wanted to say any more on that.
Thank you, Dave. Through you, Chair. Just to confirm, yeah, we do have a bid with DFT at the moment for active travel, the 4th round of funding. We have been advised that we should receive confirmation of whether we've been successful at the end of the month. Should also point out we are pursuing active travel schemes through developer funding, so through the funding we receive through Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one other point to flag, that I think it's from June this year that Active Travel England will become a statutory consultee in planning. So that may also support initiatives in the right direction.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. My question's around LH Figs, and I'm not going to be parochial, but I will give a local example, if I may.
Okay.
So the question is, you mentioned the LH Fig review, and I just wanted to ask whether this is going to look at the budgets and the sort of items that go there. And where I'm coming from on that is in devices, our LH Fig, I'm reliably informed by the chair and the officer there that we have enough projects just coming from the town to fill 2 years of budget, and that doesn't take in the other areas in the community area. And we have a gentleman in my division who put in a request for traffic restrictions outside his driveway in the autumn of 2020. And that was going through the process. Then it was moved to LH Fig, and it has actually been accepted by LH Fig as something that we could do, but there's unlikely to be budget there till 2025. So that's quite a long time for something that's relatively inexpensive and easy to deal with. So I just wondered if those sort of things are going to be looked at, as whether they should sit there or whether they could be somewhere else. Thank you.
There clearly isn't an easy answer to this. So CAT G beforehand, LH Fig now has always worked on a priority system. There's always been more demand than there has been resource to deliver. The benefit of the LH Fig process is that it does extend to include some active travel considerations, so it includes footpaths, and the budget has duly been increased as well. We're hugely cognizant of the fact that we haven't been able yet to supply the necessary number of officers to help make sure that we're maximising the budget that is there. And that's one of the reasons why the rollover is being allowed this year, and I think will be kept under review going forward. And there is recruitment activity ongoing, as Dave has indicated. We're working hard on that. I can never tell you in a finite system that all requests will ever be met, and it is down to the local groups to decide how to prioritise. And if that local group has decided that its priority is such that it won't be looked at until a 24, 25 or 25, 26 budget cycle, then that will be down to that group. You can lobby, and we will listen as to whether or not more budget should come to LHFIG, whether more resource allocation should be delegated, if you like, down to that local level rather than more strategically. I think that's always a discussion worth having, and I'll always have open ears to that. But I think we have to recognise we are in a finite system of resource and budget, and it is down to the local body to decide what order in which to prioritise its work. And it's up to us and officers here to do our utmost to make sure that we have the resources in order to meet the demand for each given year.
Okay, right now, I'll let you have a second bite, Nick, but you know I don't like it. If it's a response to one of the questions,
It was
It's
really
quick, yeah.
meant to make a couple of helpful points on the active travel, something the officer mentioned. So first of all, I don't think the Chippenham LC whip is out. I think it's still in preparation, but it was very useful to involve the local cycle network development group Chippenham with Atkins in helping to develop that. And I think a lot of that pre-consultation stage work with the local cycle group was really useful. I think it'd be something be useful to do elsewhere. The other point was, you talked about Section 106 monies for cycle infrastructure. At the sharp end, why this has proved difficult, we've got an example in Chippenham now where there's very little S106 coming from the developer, but they won't contribute towards connecting the cyclist infrastructure from their site, which has got a significant number of houses on it, because there is no design scheme to connect to. So it's all very well having these LC whips. The next stage of actually designing some schemes that can be delivered, and then you can point to developer and say, you need to connect to that scheme. That's crucial, having those ready for funding. Thank you.
okay. I'll take Councillor Jackson, then Bridget's been waiting a while as a non-member, but I'll let her speak. So, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Have I pressed the right one? It's about neighbouring authorities and active travel. So we have, certainly in the west of my division, we neighbour both Somerset and Baines. And I wonder whether or not there's any scope for some deliberate coordination of active travel plans so that this is taken into consideration, maybe even joint funding. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to respond to that?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable point. We actually had a meeting scheduled with Baines to cover a variety of transport matters, and unfortunately they cancelled just the day before. And I understand they've also done that with Nick Holder on waste-related matters this week. Nonetheless, I think the principle is absolutely right, and I'm very happy to engage with neighbouring authorities where we can.
Bridget, you've been waiting patiently. You had a question.
Oh, there we are. Thank you. Thank you. I had quite a few comments, and then, of course, now listening to some of the responses, it did make me laugh to hear about Milestone, who are going to be a little bit more careful about planning their travel routes. We've had a problem in our area with trying to get Ringway to come all the way down to the south to finish off some of their signing duties, and of course we haven't seen them for dust. So it'll be interesting to see whether Milestone actually make it. I wasn't going to criticise, actually. I think the report, as always, is really interesting. It's full of information. I think you manage extremely well on a very tight budget, and budgets aren't going to get any easier, and the condition of the roads are getting worse. One of my little niggles always is that in the report it talks about we've got 3,000 miles of road, and then it talks about how many kilometres that we've resurfaced. So with my trusty little calculator converter, we actually have 4,830 kilometres of road, of which 17 kilometres were resurfaced. That's 0.352%. 70 kilometres were surface dressed, which is 1.45%. 27 kilometres were retextured, which is 0.56%. So I only say that because with the money that we get, you don't get very much from it, and the condition of the roads are worsening. And as I said at full council, we need to be lobbying DFT, number 10, whatever, to increase the funding because our roads are quite significantly deteriorating. Most complaints I get, and I had one very irate gentleman on the phone the other day, what am I paying my council tax for, having just received his new council tax bill. They want to see our roads being properly maintained. Now, and I appreciate all the difficulties that you have. I think the number of pothole reports have just dramatically increased in January. I think November there were 677, 924 in December, 3,623 in January. Now, whether that's matched by the number of potholes that has actually increased, or it's all the irate drivers driving through them and deciding to multiple report them, I don't know. And of course, you have all the bridges, maintenance and structures and lampposts and traffic signals and goodness knows what else to do, all to take out of that funding. I was pleased to see that the cycle infrastructure has been completed at Hilperton Road in Trowbridge, the shared use path in Winsley, which I think has been a great success, and the conversion of Eastern Lane, Chippenham, to a traffic-free route. So do we monitor usage? Can we evaluate how successful they are and the number of people who are using them? I haven't quite finished yet either, sorry. Can I carry on? Or do you want to answer that?
You could have, I'll give you another 30 seconds, Bridget, because we've got
The only other thing I wanted to say was street lighting. You do mention in the report that consumption is now 5.46 million kilowatt hours, which has come down from last year. But originally, when the street lighting project was proposed, it was expected to reduce from 13 million kilowatt hours down to 5.262 million kilowatt hours. So you're almost there. I hope, do you expect to get there, or is that just a minor sort of miscalculation, do you think?
Don't all put your hands up at once to those responses, because there's quite a lot of detail in there, and I think perhaps it maybe I'll let you, Dave. You look like the devil.
I'll just do some quick responses. In terms of monitoring the active travel schemes, Bridget, the answer is yes, we do, and we will obviously share that information if you want to know how it's going. In terms of the street lighting, the figures quoted in the report are for the calendar year 2022. We're still finishing off the LED conversions at the moment. And as we move into the milestone contract, there will be some further LED works as well. I've also got some further ideas on increasing the rollout of LED lighting to what we call sign lights as well. So that's the lit signs across the network. So we're looking to keep going. So although the overall electricity usage is coming down, we've also got to remember that as more and more development takes place and we get more and more adoptions taking place, actually the number of streetlights in particular keeps going up as well. Yes, the unit cost that we're paying for electricity has gone up as well. So we're not, the financial savings that we've achieved so far are substantial, but yes, we're paying more for our unit of electricity anyway. So the bill, the electricity bill, will continue to go up.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks so much for your time. Right, so I'm going to do the recommendations now. We've all had a chance to have a speak. So, at the committee, you're going to make a recommendation to the committee. A, endorse the Highways annual review of service and confirm that the performance of the council's highways contractors has been good during 2022. B, to welcome the results summarised in the Highways Performance Management Framework. C, ask for an interim report on the milestone contract in 6 months. And D, to request a report on the highway service and the performance management framework in a year's time. Do we have a proposal for that? I'll take from Bob and a seconder, Ian. All in favour? Thank you very much. And thank you very much for Dave and all of you and taking the time to come along this afternoon. Right. Moving on to the next agenda item. Swiftly on. Housing Allocation Review 2023. This, item on the agenda is, that's right, yep. I don't think we've got councillor Alford here, have we? No. So we have got two ladies here, so that's Lucy. Could you introduce yourself? I got the names wrong. I got Nicole Smith. Yeah, Nicole and Emma Legg. Sorry, I got the names the wrong way around there because I knew it wasn't Lucy Townsend. Right, welcome, ladies. I would say that the surround is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so today's report has a couple of recommendations. So one of them is in regards to our allocations policy review, which we are doing this year. We would like to offer the opportunity for the Environment Select Committee to be involved with that review, and if they wish to set up a task and finish group to go through over the next few months the recommended changes to our allocations policy. And the report also just highlights some of our performance in regards to the allocations policy over the last few years. But it is at a high level, so it doesn't go into a huge amount of detail. So you have all received the report, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail. But the allocations policy, as you know, is the policy that we use to allocate social housing across Wiltshire. We did a full review back in 2018. We've had a few minor amendments that have been made, the last one being January this year. So fundamentally, this is a review of the whole policy. We want it to be more transparent and easy to understand. We want to be able to house those in greatest need because we are seeing a significant increase in demand for social housing. We want to give realistic expectations about being housed for those who join the register. And of course, we want to make best use of the council's limited social housing stock. So fundamentally, that is going to be the purpose of the allocations review. So we can obviously discuss that recommendation towards the end. In regards to our performance with the allocations policy, you will see that over the last few years, we've seen a significant increase in the numbers on our housing register. It was around a 38% increase over the last 3 years. The biggest increases are in our highest priority bands, which is band 1 and band 2. That has been broken down within the report, but predominantly that's around our homeless duties and our relief duties. We did see a significant increase during COVID. There was a lot of people that were very concerned, quite rightly, about losing their jobs. People who were sharing with friends and family who could no longer do that, obviously because of COVID. So we did see a significant increase during that time. We have, because of that, changed some of our practices, which has helped to reduce the numbers of applications that are going onto the register. We have introduced a system of having to speak to a specialist housing caseworker where they can talk about all of the options that are available so that people don't just go online and think that social housing is the only option for them. So that's something that is helping to provide alternatives as well to clients who have housing issues. You will see, because of that introduction, we are seeing a significant reduction in the amount of housing applications that we're receiving coming through the door. So we roughly now get around 500 a quarter, where we were getting sort of in excess of 2,000. So that has helped to really target our limited resources to be able to help those people most in need. Like I alluded to, you will see from the report that this year our biggest increase was 82% increase in band 1, which is the highest band within the policy, and that was around homelessness. So we are seeing that demand in that area increase. Preventions, unfortunately, have dropped because there is a huge amount of resource going into helping people during crisis. But that isn't to say that we're starting to look at that, because we're very aware that prevention is very key to try and reduce homelessness. So we've now got a really good tenancy support team. It's a new team of around 6 or 7 officers, and they target work to try and get in there before things break down. So, increase income, benefit backdates, help to reduce debts, which is really helping to reduce some of our figures. Unfortunately, though, because of the increase in homelessness and relief duties that we're seeing, it has impacted on the amount of clients that are in temporary accommodation. We were previously averaging around sort of 80 to 100 clients. That's recently surged. Last year, end of last year, we had to start commencing using bed and breakfast for the first time in 10 years. I would like to reassure you, though, that hasn't been for families with children. It's predominantly been singles. So we have prioritised families to go into our temporary accommodation, so our homeless hostels and our private sector lease properties. But you can see from chart 6 that the demand of temporary accommodation is increasing. We have highlighted this as a risk. We are having senior management discussions around some of those actions that we can look to try and reduce that, and also look at some of the other options with regards to temporary accommodation. So another reason for the impact of increase in clients in temporary accommodation has to be around our lettings. So we have seen a reduction in the amount of lettings that are coming through from our social housing providers. There is a number of reasons because of that. One of them, there is an increase, particularly this year, in voids. We are seeing high numbers across all housing providers with their voids, mainly because of the contractors and surveyors where they've got vacancies to try and turn around those voids. So we're looking at around 1,300 allocations a year, whereas previously they were much higher. So that is something that we are monitoring and working with our housing providers to see what we can do to try and target the properties that we are most in need of. The report breaks down those lettings, so you can see sort of the split, and you can see that we don't get very many of the larger properties. We are seeing an increased number of homeless families who have got large numbers of children. I think between 8 households, we had around 50 children. So some of them have got sort of 7 children as part of the family. And when we're only getting, say, for instance, 1 5-bedroom house a year, they are looking at long waits in temporary accommodation. So our large properties are in quite high demand. So we are trying to get our housing providers to focus on bringing forward those larger properties to help us to move on some of those large families in temporary accommodation. The lettings in Appendix 1 just gives you an idea of the breakdown of the lets per bands, because there is a presumption that all allocations go to clients in band 1, and that isn't the case. It is split, and that's predominantly due to the different types of properties. So some of our more hard to let first, second floor, 2-bedroom properties tend to go to our lower bands. Some of our shelter schemes will go to clients in lower bands. So yeah, that just gives you a breakdown there of who they've been allocated to. So that's a really brief summary, but it's really, the statutory allocations policy is a really important document for the council, so we would really welcome the opportunity to involve you as much as you would like to be involved over the next few months in developing that. Any questions?
Right, so before I open the floor then, one thing that still annoys me is the fact that I'm not going to be parochial, but I do know of a house that was in an area somewhere overlooking fields and hills, 3-bed house, good nick, gentleman died, thought he'd go on the market, sold to the private sector at a massive profit because it £320,000 and it doesn't get replaced. So I wish there's some way that we could stop these housing associations selling our properties off, because it's depriving the people of their things. They're not getting replaced at the number that are being sold. So anyway, there's nothing we can do about it unless we can find some way of objecting. But anyway, not being parochial. Anyway, hands up, anybody who wants to speak. Ian Wallace is first, then I'll come to you, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for the report. This is one that particularly interests me because 15 years ago, my family and I were statutory homeless and we were on the housing register and we were helped. And it's a hugely stressful time. And when you do get offered a property, it is excellent. It changes your life. So it's great that we are able to offer this, and hopefully we can offer more in the future. My question was particularly around the temporary housing. In Wiltshire and in Devizes in particular, that there's a lot of empty MOD housing. To pick up slightly on what the chairman just said, are there any discussions? You mentioned that you're looking at ways of dealing with the temporary housing. Are there any discussions ongoing with the MOD, or is this a potential discussion you could have to see whether some of those properties could be used to house families who need temporary accommodation? I know that some of the MOD housing in Devizes was rented privately, so it's something they have done in the past. Is that something we could explore?
That's always been on my agenda. We've had numerous conversations with the MOD about being able to utilise some of their properties for temporary accommodation, but it's not something that they are willing to do. They do have a letting agent that they do use, so they're happy for us to refer clients to that agent for private rented properties. But what I would say is there has been some lobbying recently from government in regards to Ukraine households, and they've applied some pressure on the MOD to try and utilise some of that stock for Ukraine households. So there has been a proposal from them to put forward some of their properties for that particular programme, but not for homeless temporary accommodation, unfortunately.
Okay, so Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. It's really very interesting. I'd like to focus on void properties. So it says here that Wiltshire Council has 142. I am supposing that some of our social housing providers also have void properties. I wonder whether we have a picture of that and whether or not there's a specific management task in understanding why they're void and how they can be brought back into use. Thank you, Chair.
We don't have a confirmed overall picture because we don't have the intelligence from the other housing providers, but we do have regular conversations with them, so that we are aware that they are experiencing the same issues that ourselves are experiencing in Wiltshire Council, and it's predominantly because of the lack of surveyors. So there's recruitment, there's vacancies, and trying to get hold of contractors to be able to do the work. There has been a significant backlog due to COVID, so there's been that catch-up period. But I mean, it's something that we can obviously ask them to give us the figures. But Nick Derbyshire is the one that's working on it from a Wiltshire Council perspective. So looking at the voids and looking at how we can bring those forward as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mary.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't pretend to understand this subject in any detail. So if my questions are off being, forgive me. But I was at a community safety forum this morning. And one of the things I think I understood they were saying was that in the temporary accommodation situation, people who then are wanting to go on and take a job have to leave because you can't go and be employed, go into employment. Yeah, but they end up back in the cycle because they can't find somewhere to live, and they end up back on the street and then back into temporary accommodation. So if that's an issue, I just wonder how it's addressed. That's one thing. And then I was wondering as well, from what the charity this morning, Doorway, was saying about providing immediate aid to people who are homeless, such as tents, which I think is not sort of in line with what Wiltshire Council would want to do, but because these people are desperate, there seems to be a disjoint between what Wiltshire's doing and those charity organisations and what you do to work with those. And then thirdly, there was a figure thrown around about 2.2 million grant money being put into this that Wiltshire's got, plus another 8+ million for the services relocation. I don't quite know. I'd just be interested, is that going to be put into investment in housing, or is that going to be used for some other purpose? Thank you.
Okay, so in regards to temporary accommodation, we actually encourage employment, and we wouldn't be looking to evict. We would never evict a family because they've gone into employment if they're in temporary accommodation. And we've got tenancy sustainment officers that work with families to look at all of the opportunities about maximising their ability to increase their income. Yeah, no, please do, because we absolutely would not be, I mean, I approve or oversee all the evictions, and we would never evict because someone's gone into employment, because we do encourage that. In regards to working with our charities, particularly around rough sleepers, we've got a really good collaborative multi-agency group. So Doorway is part of that. It's the rough sleeper operational group. And we do work together to try and look at all the opportunities that are available to our rough sleepers. It is right to say that we don't encourage the giving out of tents. We do have a rough sleeper initiative funding, which is around £500,000 a year, which we get from government, and that funds our rough sleeper team. It funds about 20 bed spaces for rough sleepers, personalised budgets. There's numerous things that it does fund to basically work with our rough sleepers to get them off the streets and look at alternative options. So rather than tents, we would rather use our what we call sit-up service. We've got the Bridge and the Haven, which is an interim room which they can go to when we do our assessments and work out what their longer term needs are. So it's really important. The charities that work with rough sleepers, we absolutely work with them, but sometimes we do have different priorities. So they will still actively give out tents, and we work with them. We like them to let us know about those that they have given tents to, so we can work out where they are and get our outreach team out to go and see them, and then discuss their wider housing options. The 8 million, I'm not too sure about the 8 million, where that's come from. I wish I had 8 million, but I don't. Yeah, if you send me the link, we can certainly look into that, but I'm not aware of it from a housing perspective, but we can certainly. So we get, we don't get two, we get 1,000,005 for housing prevention, and then we get the Rough Sleeper Initiative funding of around 510,000 a year. So it depends how they work that out, but it's not 2.2. But send me the details that you've got, and I can certainly look into it, because it might be a few add-ons that go somewhere else and not to my team specifically.
Okay, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Can you actually tell us how many properties are lost by the associations that they sell on?
No, that's not data that I collect. I don't think as a council we are provided that information from the housing providers, because they're not obliged to inform the council if they're intending to sell the properties. Some of them do decide to let us know that they might be disposing of particular properties, but it's not information that we collect, because they don't have to provide it to us. The government do. There is a return that housing providers have to do annually, so there probably is a link. I can try and find it for you on the website, which the government would then produce to see how many properties are disposed of by individual housing providers.
Councillor Rounds, did you say you want to say something? Yeah.
My question is, the council's working away, doing its thing, and we also have, of course, within the county, housing associations doing their thing. I have to say I'm ignorant as to exactly how many there are. Do you have the figure? 25 housing associations. Is there an overarching authority or body that is correlates the information that you're presenting to us in one place? So in other words, we can look at the housing associations and see what their problems are in the same light that you're giving us.
So each housing provider will do annual reports like we do, which gets presented to Cabinet and full council. So individually there will be annual reports. Oh yeah, sorry. But there's also the government. So every year the housing providers are obliged to confirm how many lets they do, how many properties they've sold. So there's an annual return. I don't actually get involved in doing it, but it does go to government, and then government do provide a link so that people can go in and see all of that individual information. So I can try and find, but it is annual and it's done by the government.
My concern really is that, anecdotally, when you're talking to people around the county, homelessness is seen as Wiltshire Council's problem, not a housing association problem. And so quite often you'll be told a problem of a particular family, for instance, in my town, Calne, when actually they're not in council property. And so sometimes it's a little confusing as to how, as a councillor, I can respond to that question from a member of the public.
I mean, it's the local authority that has the statutory responsibility for rough sleepers. However, collectively, it should be everyone's responsibility that we work to try and prevent homelessness, whether that be a family or single people. So we do work very closely with our housing providers, but fundamentally, if things break down, then it does fall to the local authority in the end, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a quickie, Tony, because I don't like the second part.
It's very quick, and it's possibly a helpful clarification. Do not housing associations rely on the council to give them information that somebody requires housing?
No, we don't provide them information. What we do is we hold a housing register. So that housing register has information around all of the clients. If they've got vacant properties that are ready for let, they will advertise it on our system called Homes for Wiltshire. The clients on the housing register can then bid for those properties, and the housing providers have access to limited information about those clients to enable them to offer them a tenancy.
Okay, I think that's all the ones done. Well done, thank you. I'm going to put some recommendations to the committee. So A, we're going to agree to be involved in the review and development of a new allocation policy. B, set up a task and finish group to work with housing in the development of a revised allocations policy. And C, to note the most recent statistics for the allocation system. Do we have a proposer for that? Tom, and Ian seconded, thank you. All in favour of that? And do we want to set that task group up, because you're interested in it?
Task and finish group, yeah.
Task and finishing group, do you want to set that up today, or do you want to,
Volunteers.
if we got volunteers? I'll tell you what I'll do, Simon will send round, and how many want to be on it, it'll be fine, okay, that'll save us go around and round in circles. Thank you very much for ladies for your attention, attendance, and keep up the good work. Right. 9, leisure services insourcing. So, and libraries, I think we can probably take them together and then we can break it down to say, rather than doing it individually separately. And it's on pages 193 to 210. I think we welcome our Cabinet Member for Leisure and Libraries, Councillor Blair Pilling. We have, on excuse, we have David Redfern. The musical chairs is about to finish. Well, Ian, thanks for your patience. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to reflect a little bit on the highways one about the LED lighting. Certainly in my area, it's really easy to spot the unadopted roads in the MOD now, because you look for the poor old-fashioned lighting in it, and it's very clear who owns the road, not us, in that. You asked us some time ago to come back and report to you on leisure in terms of how have we done on insourcing in terms of finance and membership since we insourced on the 1st of October 2021. And you asked us to give you an update on the development of library services. And David and his team are here to do that. What I would like to do, please, is pinch a few minutes at the beginning to put some wider context to that, to what they're going to tell you. And in that, to give you an idea, an understanding of the scope and the aspects and the direction and ambition of libraries and leisure, and what we've been focusing on at the more kind of organisational level over the last year, and where we're heading in that. But the main presentation to answer your actual questions will come from David and his team. Firstly, we've been settling in, as we're here to answer, on the insourcing. I would highlight a bit out of that, in that as a result of having a single organisation, David has been restructuring his management team, and that's been substantial, and therefore there was quite a lot of bits of work could not actually get going until that restructuring was in place. And you've also got to bear in mind that as we came out of COVID and after we restructured, there wasn't a switch that suddenly put everybody back to work in their old jobs, because A, there were people who are still redeployed because of COVID, and B, there's quite a lot of turnover in the more hands-on jobs in leisure, and therefore people left and needed to be recruited anew. So there's quite a lot of lag time, I'm afraid. I'm not building up excuses, because in fact, actually what they're going to be presenting you with is a really good story, but I just wanted to put that bit of context onto it. and in that, I was going to say, we've been re-establishing ourselves, and therefore it's to do with getting our customers back in and recruiting new staff and making sure we got everybody there to do the job. We've also been rethinking the whole thing about what is the purpose of leisure and libraries within the council. We're not David Lloyd, we're not somewhere, so why are we doing all of this within the council? And that rethinking has made us come up with what we call our kind of 5 main themes, our 5 main stars in that, because it's easy to say, and it says it in the business plan, that we must be fit for purpose and financially sustainable. Well, define purpose in that. Define financially sustainable. And what we've come up with and are now applying in every single decision that is made at every single level in this are 5 areas in that. Firstly, the financial sustainability. What are the financial numbers? Secondly, what is the contribution to public health? And there's much more of a focus now, if you go to leisure centres, about what is actually going on, not just to support those in the Lycra on the machines, but those people who, for their health and recovering from various things and age and all sorts of disabilities, what can we do to help people in the public health area? What are we doing to help communities develop? What are we doing to help the local economy? And finally, what are we doing in terms of the environment? You asked the question earlier about highways. I think we have a very positive story. I'm not going to try and rattle through the numbers in the environmental area, but we're, I think, almost up in national leaders in terms of the solar panels, the heat source pumps and everything that we've invested in and put into centres. So we're quite pleased with that, and there's a lot more to do. And we've been developing our metrics that ask ourselves, how are we doing under each of those headings? So that's been, I think, big steps forward in understanding why we exist and what we should be doing. We've been investing. You've seen Melksham campus open, which is a huge success. The new Trowbridge leisure facilities are, as a project, is on track, on time to schedule. We have another 11.5 million that was allocated in the budget in the previous year for improvements, which we're now considering specific projects in what we will do. I've mentioned solar and pumps, and the final one to mention is I think it's probably in this year, every one of our swimming pools will have a modern disabled entry pod to help people get into them, which again indicates the kind of direction of travel of what we're trying to make our leisure centres be there for. And finally, that everything I've described so far has been internally done within the current management capacity. CLT has now put us on track to be a transformation project in itself, which is great because we can then bring more resources into it and get into a kind of higher gear. And the headings, this is not actually an approved paper with everything itemized in detail yet, but I can tell you the direction of travel of it is that headlining that is a review of our facilities and estate, looking at community outreach, because leisure library is not just about what goes on in the buildings, it's about outreach to communities. The integration of other council services into our leisure centres, and in particular into our libraries, and I know the team are going to tell you about some of that. Developing our branding. And then finally, because remember, I started this whole question by saying, or you started it by saying, how are you doing on insourcing? It's all in managed. The end of all of that, then we'll have another look and say, well, is that the right operating model across the totality of this? But let's get all of those other bullet points I've mentioned sorted first. So I just wanted to give you that wider context. I'll now ask David to answer your specific questions.
I'm actually going to hand to the team first, and then I'll take any difficult questions or any questions indeed that might come.
Well, I'd have to congratulate you on what you've done over the years. Who's going to speak on this? Alex, sorry, I apologise. I thought you were going to do a little presentation, and then you said about questions. I thought, hang on, Alex,
I can plug in.
come on, where you go.
Perfect. So I'm just going to run you through some financial details on the table on the screen. So this table shows targeted and actual income and expenditure for leisure in the period April 21 to December 21 and April 22 to December 22, which is the bottom section. Those periods are the longest comparable date range that we have financial data available to us at this present time. In the top section, April 21 to December 21, this represents financial data from 6 months where it was purely just income from in-house existing Wiltshire Council leisure centres, and 3 months worth of data where that was combined with the 10 transition in-source centres. In the bottom table, the period April 22 to December 22, that represents income and expenditure from all 20 leisure centres for the whole period. That partly explains why there is a difference in the scale of the numbers that you can see from Table 1, Table 2. Looking at Table 1, targeting income you can see was 5.2 million, and we made 4.5 million, so there was a deficit of 700,000 there. However, expenditure was 1.2 million below target, and therefore the net position overall was £480,000 better off than target. In Table 2, income is better than target by 365,000, and expenditure is better than target by 202,000, therefore creating a final position better than target of 568,000. This slide summarises a little bit what I've just said there. So really to clarify, actual income in the first period, April 21 to December 21, 700,000 below income target, but our expenditure was better by 1.27 million. There's some detail there around the source of that income, given that insourcing happened in October 21, so mid-period. And then April 22 to December 22, both income and expenditure was better than the targeted budget for both. Therefore, net position between the two periods was 87,000 as an improvement. From a membership perspective, the graph shows growth of memberships since the insourcing took place. So this is from October 21 to the end of February 23, sorry. And it shows the three main income areas in leisure. So fitness memberships, swimming memberships, and swim school memberships. The transition centres, the so-called insourced places leisure centres, are the first three columns on the left, and the existing Wiltshire Council centres, the three columns on the right. You can see that since October 21, there's been growth in all membership categories, which is really positive, and a really particular highlight in terms of the fitness membership growth in the Wiltshire Council centres themselves, or the existing centres themselves. Just to summarise that, then growth in all membership types across all leisure centres. Clearly, that means there's more people participating than there were in October 21. In addition, we're supporting the growth of swim school and swimming lessons for children across the county. And there are now nearly 12,000 young swimmers on the Aqualite Swim School programme. Final point there are different rates of growth between the in-source centres and the in-house centres. So from October 2021 to February 23, in-source centre growth is 6% and the in-house centre 16%. Just a summary slide to show the actual trend line in terms of the growth of those memberships since October 21. On the left-hand side, that's core memberships. So that's fitness and swimming memberships alone. On the right-hand side, that's fitness, swimming memberships and our swim school memberships. So you can see that across all centres, there's been a positive growth between October 21 and today. There are some peaks and troughs in that, which we'll see. The monthly downturns are related to the point in the month when we take our direct debit collections. So we only take direct debit collections on the 5th of the month. So if there are any cancellations in that month, then it's reflected on or after that data point. You can see, and it was mentioned by Ian earlier, the growth of memberships in August 22, which is very much related to the growth of memberships at Melksham campus. But generally, there's memberships are going in the right direction. There's a plateauing that you can see in the latter half of 2022, which you'd expect over the course of the year, and then a growth period again that's showing in the early part of 23. Finally, we are aware, obviously, that there's request for opening or a leisure offer on bank holidays, which there currently isn't available at any leisure centre. So there's a scoping project taking place to investigate that further.
Just go straight to the library and then we can come back and jump in twice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we last reported back in September 21, I think it was. So it's 18 months since we've been able to report on statistics, and we're really pleased to be able to show you these statistics today and show you what the overall picture is since just before the pandemic and through the pandemic and where we are now. So the libraries measure issues and visitors. They're part of our core statistics, and you can see on the graph that in 2019-20, our issues were 1,483 plus million. So we have got to the point now where we are nearly back up to our full issue rate, normal rate, which is really fantastic. You can see the dip before we were completely fully opened in the middle year. That is, we think, is a very good statistic, 92% pre-pandemic levels. And that is continuing to increase. So that's fantastic. Visitors are not quite up to pre-pandemic levels. That's simply because we have not got all our activities back up together. There's been a slower return of activities, although they're now all coming on stream. And this is in line with the national picture that we have. Other libraries, other authorities, the 151 other networks for the library authorities have got the same picture. So we're not too worried about that. Okay, so I just wanted to focus on the library service priorities going forward. We are focusing on a facilities review, which will be reducing property costs, implementing community hubs across the county. Ian just mentioned about this earlier. So this is our transformation plan, which we have already embarked on. And this is to enable us to provide better services, better costs, and also connect communities better, and to provide services actually in the communities, in the space in the community where we're going to get the best footfall and where they'll be best used. So, for instance, Market Lavington Library we moved last year, or the year before actually now, 2021, and Durrington Library reopened yesterday in Durrington Village Hall after it had moved out of its very old premises that had been in since 1970. They were about to collapse. So we're really delighted that we've now in that new hub, and we're looking forward to a really good partnership working with the town council. We've already touched on Melksham also as part of our moving into community hubs, which is a really, really good success story. And footfall and visitor levels have gone through the roof in that particular library. So we know that model really works, joining up with other services. So we're continuing to map this work, and we're now working with Systems Thinking and FM to look at other buildings that we can scope into this project. Okay, so library service priorities. All our priorities are based around what we call the universal offers, and these are
developed by the Libraries Connected, which is the libraries public sector support body. And again, this is all these offers are developed across other libraries nationally as well as locally, and they fit really well with the council priorities and objectives. So I'm going to just run through those and show you some examples of where we have what services we're developing or we've developed in the last 18 months. As always, it does involve working with very much with partners, and that is where we see ourselves going. We really need to work closer with external and internal partners to be able to achieve all the goals that we've highlighted. Okay, so digital information, having access to digital services is really important, because we know that it's almost digital by default these days. If you can't access a computer, or you can't access Wi-Fi, or haven't got any data, then you really are at a disadvantage. So as part of our inclusion policy, we have introduced a national data bank project in 5 of our libraries. This is very new, but basically this gives people who are very low incomes or poor incomes access to free data. They can come into one of 5 libraries to pick up free data, either SIM, that's 3 Vodafone, and they can take it away and they can have it for 6 months and another 6 months renewal after that. So we know that this is really important, because if you haven't got access to data, then you can't maybe do universal credit, you can't apply for a job, you can't upskill yourself. So it's really important. And that, on the back of that, we are also still providing IT support. We've introduced digital sessions and online sessions, which are very basic, but are really important to get people at the right level so they can access that education. And we've had 407 online sessions. We started evaluating much better as well about how our customers actually value those services and what they're getting out of it, because we feel that's really important to evaluate the impacts and outcomes. So 90% of those attendees said it improved their confidence, which we feel is a good statistic. Looking forward, we are working on a multi-maths project. We've got funding as part of national government funding to roll out basic numeracy sessions in the libraries. This is to build number confidence so that people can actually start talking about numbers. If they have fear of maths, they can start accessing maths activities in libraries. And this is, again, really important for people upskilling themselves, getting jobs, and improving themselves and increasing their prosperity. Health and well-being is really important to us, because it's just part of everything that we do. Helping people self-help, helping them to access information, good information, and other services in the library. We have a collection of Reading Well books, which we use or can be accessed for free. We've seen a huge increase in the issues of those, 26.7% in the previous year. And we're beginning to work with social prescribers to see how we can actually steer and link people to activities happening in the communities as part of that social and wellbeing offer. And we've also got a new monitoring blood pressure project developing. We're hoping to be able to get blood pressure monitors in the libraries so that people can come in, and if they feel they monitor and they've got a high health issue, then they can go straight to their GP. That is something that's on the cards and which we're developing now. Of course, reading is at the heart of what we do, and it's the basics of the library service that we offer. There are 1 in 6 adults have very low literacy skills. So we feel it's important that not only is reading for pleasure important, but also encouraging access to all our different services that we offer for reading. One of those is our reading groups. And we have got over 200 groups in the county. Some of those are particular groups that actually allow access for visually impaired people or people who've got memory loss. And in fact, I don't think David knows this, but we've got the ITV are coming in tomorrow to film our reading group in Trowbridge Library tomorrow. So that's really, really good news. We achieved funding for green libraries, and we have now showcasing what the council are actually doing for their climate agenda by we achieved funding to have display boards that we can now move around libraries and show what we're actually promoting. Cultural events, again, we've had 5,000 cultural events since April 22. This is enormous. People don't always have access to good culture in their community. You need to pay to go and see a really good performance like Bristol or London. We are bringing good cultural events to the county, and this improves people's well-being and their accessing it in their home community. We've had panto performances at Melksham Library. We had a play performance for young children yesterday in Trowbridge. It just goes on and on. And again, support for the vulnerable. This is really, this is obviously a very, very important part of our accessible services. And this winter we have been providing warm packs for our customers. And this has been very humbling, actually, seeing people coming in, wanting a very simple offering of a hot water bottle, blanket or thermal mug, but has been really, really well appreciated. And on the back of that, we've also been giving energy advice. Our staff have been trained to provide, to have energy conversations with customers so that they can provide support and refer them on to Warm and Safe Wiltshire. And our home library service, of course, is one of our very established services, and we're continuing to provide that all the way as we did through the pandemic as well. You can see the statistics there. Children and young people. Apparently, in the first 1,000 days of a child's birth, they are accessing, or they are developing their brain. It's the highest development that they will have during that period. So we put great value on our rhyme times. We've had 19 libraries are offering these, and these are really important for language skills and also combating isolation between parents and forging those good parent-child bonds. And our Summer Reading Challenge offer, which we've been doing for many years, but again, that brings in a lot of children who would not normally have access to books in their own home, and improves their education and their chances in life. I think that my slides suddenly come to an end for some reason, but I'd just like to say that we really feel that we are making a difference. And that by evaluating, it is about people. It's not just about numbers. It's about what difference that makes, what we make to those customers and those outcomes. Thank you.
Come back in, Chairman. I hope you gleaned from that, and thank you for all of that. It's a bit of an oversimplification to say, if you go back a few years, we were looking at budget measures. How do we save money and still provide our statutory service? Well, it was in the budget. Well, we'll close the small libraries and so on. That's been completely turned around now. We're not looking at closing any leisure centres. We're not looking at closing any libraries, whereas other authorities are. What we're doing is making them far more useful to the community and to people, making them far more integrated into other aspects of the council's business plan and what people need in all of that, and more cost effective in doing that. And the Market, Lavington and Durrington are examples of that. Let's not cut the service. Let's make savings if we don't need to run that building and we can actually do it better within a community building, let's do that. In that, if we can meet our financial objectives at the same time as increasing and improving what it is we do as a service in that. So I'm really pleased with what is being reported to you. I'll shut up now and invite your question.
Thank you for that, team. I just want to congratulate the library people for it's not just people just seem to go to a library to get a book and back. That's changed dramatically now. Not only are you providing libraries, you're providing education for young children. They keeping people warm and safe, even on the health and wellbeing side, engagement with doctors and blood pressure and all that. And even then, you missed it out in the leisure side of it, the leisure centres. When I was on leisure, there was GP referrals being used in our leisure centres. And I believe that still goes on. And I was always trying to tap the public health up for money to go into leisure because I felt that we were doing a job for them. And I think I've always said over the period of time, and I'm glad we've gone in-house now, I've always said over the period of time, if we spend a few million quid out of our budgets propping this or supporting this, because it's never going to make a dead profit, not yet, not far off, it's coming that way. It's a way of keeping people fit and healthy and keeping them out of the doctor's surgery. That's the secret. Anyhow, well done to the team. I'm now going to open this for questions, and I think I've got Councillor Matthew first.
Thank you very much, Chair. And indeed, congratulations to the library team. Great report, looking for pandemic to now. The only question I would have liked to have seen more information on, though they may be very difficult to glean, would be the impact of the warm spaces thing in terms of how many people were accessing that. On the issue of the leisure centres, by contrast, I appreciate that the in-housing thing happened and so your data doesn't go back far, but I would have thought that the data would be there to actually look at what the situation was pre-pandemic up to today. So I think that would have been something useful to do. And it might also have been useful, given that we don't have, there's not an exhaustible number of leisure centres, to actually have that figure broken down by leisure centres so we can see how individual leisure centres have performed over that time. Thank you.
David, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, if I can come back on those, I think in terms of giving you a feeling of Carolyn may have the exact numbers, but we were down in Salisbury Library as a senior team the other day, and it was reported to us that at least 50 plus warm and safe packs had gone out in one library alone. I think you can get a flavour of how successful that's been. And you hear some of the anecdotal stories as well of how appreciative some of our residents are when they come and take these warm and safe packs. And there's the simplest of tools, if you like, that are in there to help our residents, but yet they're so appreciative. It really has been a successful, collaborative, multi-agency approach to that. So I think that gives the indication on that. I totally share your frustrations from the leisure perspective. As part of the insourcing, we were handed no data by the previous supplier of the in-house contracts. That data never came over. It was frustrating, but I think perhaps moving forward, now we have a full year's worth of data this year, coming back to this committee in a 12 months' time to make some like-for-like comparisons with perhaps some more individual data that highlights what we kind of know already, because we're looking at the data all the time and looking at where are the challenges, what can we learn from in terms of, what's really happening well. It would be great to come back to this committee in 12 months' time and do some more like-for-like comparisons.
Could I just follow that up very quickly and I do find it astounding that you weren't handed the data from before. And I would have thought there would have been reports that would have been handed to council of what had been happening, but strange.
Councillor Merry, and then Councillor Trotman,
Thank
and then
you,
Councillor Watt.
So just some sustainability questions on the leisure centres side. So I'm assuming that because we've taken over the management, that has enabled us to invest in the way which seems to be a good news story in terms of heat pumps, solar panels. I know the Olympiad's got heat pumps. The application for solar panels, I think, has been kicked back out because there was a technical issue with it. I think there was a technical issue with it going forward as an application, so it's going to have to come back. But anyway, we'll get through in the end. hopefully fabric of the building and all of that. So I think that is a good news story, and it also should enable us to report properly on leisure centres, which is more difficult when you've got a second tier of management, getting the information out about electricity usage, etc. So that's all good. I don't know where the sustainable transport angle fits with leisure centres. So it may be that that's to do with the assets team, but are we making sure we've got very good secure cycle parking? We're investing in EV infrastructure. We know already that we've had a 600% or something increase in EVs in the county, and 20% of new sales at the moment are EVs, electric vehicles, 20% of new sales, and it's going to go up because by 2030, that's all you'll be able to buy. So we need to be investing in making sure people can get there sustainably, and I don't know how that fits in with the picture. But then the third thing, I think, is this review of leisure centres, and I think sustainability is not just about the leisure centres themselves, but it's about their locations. And I had some worrying remarks made at a recent Ask the Leader session where, there was talk about, oh, yes, well, the Olympiad's very old, we can knock it down and build a new one out of town. Well, of course, that would put dependency on cars. It would be away from the town centre, which we're trying to keep alive. It would be a ridiculous thing to do when you could renovate or build on the same site. So I think the sustainability of these places around the county is also important in terms of location and what we're going to do to reinvest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come back on that? I said we were developing metrics for each of those, and under the environment, we've talked about the possibility of developing the metric of not what is the carbon footprint of the building, but what is the carbon footprint of the people getting to the building, and so on. So yeah, we're looking at all of that. And when we're not in the business of just saying, hey, we'll tear down this leisure centre and build another one there, because, hey, that has an effect in itself. But, for example, when we're looking at Trowbridge, what its environmental footprint will be, and not just the footprint of the building, but the footprint, the wider aspects of access to it, etc., is all part of the consideration in that. We will be getting report at the end of this month to the board, in which we're looking at the options for it. I'll let David say, but go on, you say what dates anybody else will be sitting in, I think.
Dr. Murray, I think you're talking about the transformation programme, aren't you? Or is it specifically with regard to Trowbridge Leisure Centre?
No, it's not Trowbridge, I'm from Chippenham, but it was Richard Clewer's comments in Chippenham the other day that set this off, and he said there was a review coming, and so we were hoping to engage with that at an early stage.
Yeah, we're engaging with the transformation board that's recently been set up to understand, two particular transformation pieces, which is a facilities review, as has already been mentioned, and perhaps what operating models we might use. I think the operating models one will come into the future. From where I'm sat, I think we need to, the transformation team are currently assessing what capacity they think we need to be able to assess and develop that facilities review. We're only at the very early stages of that yet. I would come back as well and say, with regard to the Olympiad or any of the other sites, we will look at the data. We will, as we have done with Trowbridge, we'll be very thorough in our consultation with stakeholders, and we'll make sure we take everybody's interests forwards on any decisions that we make. So I don't think in the short to medium term, I don't envisage anything happening at Chippenham at all, which is, I think, your anxiety at this moment in time, is it?
I think it was the wider point, really, but I just thought maybe this review's coming through and there'll be a chance to sort of examine some of that if it is coming through, but clearly it's not yet. No.
Sorry, I can't give you any dates from the transformation thing. I haven't yet seen a draft. I've just given you a kind of headline flavours of the areas that will be looked at within it. That's as far as I can go at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Trotman.
Yep. So thank you, Chairman. Yes, we're obviously in our time we're very grateful for the reimbursement and the refurbishment of £3.5 million in Calne. which took place a couple of years ago, which has really sort of brought the membership up. Fine. I do question, not question, but I just wonder, we have 2 private leisure centres in the town with swimming pools, and I just make sure that we are competitive with those to contain the membership that we have now and the growth of it, which is good. I've got to come back to the libraries, if I may. One of the points I saw was the home library services, but no mention of the mobile library service. Now, really, I've seen the vehicle going around. Our town is based, the sort of 7 odd villages around us. And obviously, this has been taken up really well. And I just hope that will be retained, because I know that is at a cost. And obviously, looking at electric vehicles and so on, you may be in for quite a high cost later on. But just to make sure that that is actually in the plan to continue.
It's not under threat.
Can you answer the competitive nature of our centres because of the private sector has really moved
Yeah, I
forward
can. In that, bear in mind, we're 20 leisure centres. We've got a single offering. We had to harmonise 2 complete sets of charging regimes to have one set, because if you join one, you joined all 20. So we can't have a separate charging regime for each separate leisure centre. But yeah, it's a factor in all of this. And it's a factor in when we think about, well, what do we offer in the future? And if that part of the market is already dominated, why would we invest simply to be in a head-to-head competition that's already looked after, so to speak? We're about focusing on what the council's core needs are in that.
2 comments I would come back on that one is that I think in terms of our vulnerable residents, some of the pricing strategies we've got are just unbeatable by the private sector, if I'm being honest. So we are absolutely protecting those vulnerable residents. And you make a good point from a commercial perspective. I don't think with an offer where we span across 20 sites, north, south, east and west, central, we have to have consistency, and we've made a great deal of pain has gone into harmonisation. I think what we have to concentrate in is stick to our brand, make sure the product is exemplary, because I would argue that some of these private sector operations, even very good public schools in your area, probably don't come anywhere near our product value. So people have their choices.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, thank you for 2 excellent presentations, loads of data, which I love data and information. My question, I'm going to focus on libraries, if I may, and the amazing array of projects and services that are available, which I think is excellent. I've got 2 questions on that. The first is how you generally, how do we publicise that and make people aware that they can access all those things there, which, I wasn't aware of many of those. So how are we getting that message out? And the second question is on the data bank project in particular. I'm a trustee of a homelessness charity which supports a lot of people, both who are homeless but also who are in the category of people who are eligible for that service. Are we actively working with partners like the charity I'm involved with and others to make sure that their guests know that this service is available?
Yeah, I'll take the latter one first. I think we could always do more. I think, we've got in terms of marketing, leisure's been very different, and I made the point to Ian a couple of years ago, and Ian was very supportive of us developing, in conjunction with our central marketing and comms people. We have to be a little bit more commercially astute there if we're going to develop that sustainable model. And Alex here is in charge of that unit now, and we continue to develop that. I think from a library's perspective, sorry, I was answering the second part. We could always do more. We could always work with more partners. And what I would suggest, Councillor Wallace, is if you think we're missing out on some, it would be helpful to know who they are, and we can sit down and we can talk to them and we can help those more vulnerable residents, because that is what we're all about. Not just that, many things to many people, but that is one of our core objectives. The marketing kind of thing and promotions thing, I've kind of just explained. I don't think the library service kind of justifies the road that we've gone down. However, who knows what, you know, we're ever reviewing our model. We're never rest on our laurels and think we've cracked it, because we definitely haven't. And, you know, whether we use the part of the model that we are now developing in leisure, or we get better working with our central comms on wherever there are gaps. What I can tell you is, from where I'm sat, having been with the council for 8 years now, there's never been as much join up across services in developing our product, if you like, to better standards. So take stock of your comments. Hope I've gone some way to answer it, but I think it's more that you've suggested some things that we perhaps need to take a look at, more than needing to answer it.
I'm going to chime in on this, because I think there's always a danger of us looking at this all as a top-down and everything's right at the top level and so on. If you were to go, for example, to Warminster Library or Malmesbury Library or whatever and ask what's gone on, it's gone on because of the link between the person managing that library and the leaders of the community, not because somebody's dictated it from this building or whatever in that. And on balancing that with leisure, I get letters, you know, writing to me, people saying about the timing of swim schools or the this and that and everything. And the answer back to people is, talk to the manager of the leisure centre. We are, you know, giving him more autonomy and asking him to optimise what he is doing with his facility and his staff in his community. So talk to the local managers, please.
Alex.
I was just going to say as well, actually, your timing of the question is really good, because I'm meeting with Head of Library Services next week to discuss how we can actually benefit from each other's memberships and customers. So we should be sharing the information that library services have got available to our leisure customers more, and vice versa. Actually, that might be more beneficial from a leisure and a membership perspective, and may drive more traffic to libraries also. It's a conversation I'm having with our comms team about a variety of different services, so that we are more joined up, and that we do capitalise on the existing contacts and relationships that are already out there.
Thank you for that, Alex. Councillor Jackson. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, many thanks for the reports, which I think are really encouraging. I'm delighted to see that you're considering public holiday opening. Members of this committee will know that I've raised that subject in the past, and I wish you the best of luck with going forward. I look forward to hearing that you're going to do that. This business about sharing information and access, why do we need a library card and a leisure services membership card? Can't we have a card which gives us both? Thank you, Chair.
There's a simple demarcation there. I think we've always strived and looked at that. I mean, the simple answer is, Councillor Jackson, is there are two different systems that don't really talk to each other, and that's where we're at this stage. Who knows whether we can get involved in somebody's R&D to perhaps, but that's certainly not a priority for us at this moment in time, because it's not really holding us back. It is, we understand, very much better if you've got one card in your wallet that accesses your library entitlement and your leisure services. But as yet, there's no easy solution out there on the market, otherwise we'd have it.
Oh, there you go. Well, perhaps we could put it on that new Wiltshire app. Arr, arr. No more questions on that, I don't think. Right, I'm going to do the recommendations on this one then. So A, note the leisure services insourcing update and the increasing membership numbers. and improving net financial position. B, to note the library service update, the recovery since the pandemic and its priorities and the range of its activities. And C, to receive updates in 12 months' time to include further trend data, the outcome of the public holiday pilot for you, Tony, and further information on the transformation review. Can I have a proposal from the floor on that one? I'll let you propose that one, Tony, because you wanted your holidays.
Delighted to propose.
Right, okay, and a seconder? I'll take that from Brian Matthew then. All in favour? All done. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you very much, Ian and your team, Alex and David and Madam. Thank you very much indeed. Gone by my 2 hours, which is very disappointing. That's the first time in 10 years I've been told out. Right. Now we've got to go back to our man for our next. I'm sorry, I'll turn the page over. Really lost the will to live. Item 8, Wiltshire Design Guide, draft for publication. Yeah, and no, I'm not going to do that. I don't think. I think we're all right. We're on the closing overs. I'd like to get him bad. Nick, it's your floor. It's the Wiltshire Design Draft for public consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I won't say too much, but great pleasure in introducing this design guide, which sets down clearly and for everyone what our expectations are, how our county will, how our county will look into the future. And I think it's something which the public and members can buy into, and I think it hopefully will make some of our developments more acceptable in general. I think, you know, it's a difficult balance between what is highly prescriptive and what is light touch. I think we've tried to you know, put something here that's really relevant, but you might say, well, it isn't overly specific in ways that maybe you would like to see. I think the difficulty is that what's right for, say, Malmesbury is not going to be appropriate for villages around Salisbury, say. So I think, you know, we have to be realistic as to how far prescription can go. I think this strikes the right balance. I think neighbourhood plans are the place where actually more prescription on design and vernacular aspects can be contained. So I think that's probably all I really want to say at the moment. You know, as I say, I think this is rather good news. And I think it will help avoid some of the perhaps confused, maybe confused is probably overly strong, but certainly, you know, developments that are perhaps we look at afterwards and say, oh dear, that could have been a bit better. I think this helps avoid that in the future. Lynn Trigwell is now going to present a short introduction, if that's all right with you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how this all works and fits together. You've got the documents as the draft report is set out in Appendix 1, and there's a summary report which you'll have seen, which gives you the high-level information about the document itself. So if we just first of all consider this in the national context, there is national guidance which was brought out in 2019. This sets down the blueprint for the framework for what good design looks like. And that, in the absence of any local design guidance, is the document that your development managers and your developers would refer to structure their designs coming forward. There is also the National Planning Policy Framework, and in that makes reference to the importance of good design and the need to provide a local framework, and that if such a local framework is produced, such as this design guide, that it should be tailored to the circumstances and scale of change of each place and should allow for suitable degree of variety, particularly important in a county as big as Wiltshire with quite diverse different styles and character across it. So if you take it then down from a national level down to a local policy level, it needs to accord with the current core policies within the core strategy and will align with new policies coming out of the emerging local plan review process as well. Needs to align with the objectives within the corporate plan, and it is a cross-cutting document, you will have seen, that actually picks up on many areas the council deals with. It needs to link with key themed strategies that already exist and future ones, particularly the green and blue infrastructure strategy and the climate strategy, and any other supplementary planning documents that are produced, and that's just an example on there regarding waste and storage. Policies can also be taken down right down to a neighbourhood planning level, and it needs to accord with and align with policies that already exist, but also policies that are coming forward through new neighbourhood plans. And there's a secondary document that we've produced to support that neighbourhood planning process. I'll refer to it in a second. So, as we said, it is a high-level document that sits just below national guidance and will support that national objective. So that was very clear that it needed to align with that. The second thing is it needed to be a document that would work for developers at a really early stage in decision making when making planning projects. What happens at the moment is that those decisions are made, and when we come to see them, they're fairly set in stone, and it's hard to move a developer forward to get the best design out of the process. So this will support developers in that thought process right from a very early stage. It focuses on the full 10 characteristics of design as set out in the national guidance and doesn't focus on any singular one. Good design needs to pick up on all 10 characteristics. As I say, it needs to align with existing and new supplementary planning documents that are coming forward. It needs to be clear and well presented so that the text is easy to understand and the illustrations reinforce the points. So this just shows you the 10 characteristics are set out on the wheel on the top. That's the national 10 characteristics. And the contents of the design guide, each chapter, each section within the document aligns with one of those 10 characteristics and then is supported by some further information and documents in the Appendix A to E at the back. So for a decision maker or somebody who's assessing whether it's good quality design, and that may be development management case officers, they need to take into consideration high-level national documents, any local documents, any neighbourhood planning made documents, and a combination of those each brings down the detail to a different scale. Neighbourhood planning, as you can see from the illustration on the right-hand side, that can take it down right down to an actual settlement level, and that's supported by a document that we've produced to support neighbourhood planning groups to consider good design right at the outset. So this has been through considerable internal consultation. It's very cross-cutting, so listed along the bottom are some of the departments that have been involved in its development, including public health, spatial planning, climate, waste, affordable housing, play, public protection, etc. And the way it's set out is a series of expectations. That sets down what we expect to see or expect the developer to consider. And it is up to them then to demonstrate why they have deviated from that, because this is what we expect. If there is a particular circumstance that dictates that they need to move away from it, maybe a local circumstance, then obviously there's the flexibility. But otherwise, it's something that we expect them to accord to. This document, if it gets adopted as a supplementary planning document, will have weight in the planning process. So just to let you know the timescales for it, obviously it's being considered today. It's going to Cabinet at the beginning of May. There'll be a 4-week consultation period during the summer, but before the school holidays break, so that there's plenty of people around. And that'll be an online event as well as in-person events. It'll come back to Cabinet once all those comments have been considered and evaluated and amendments made where necessary. And then we are hoping to get it to be adopted as a supplementary planning document in October at full council. Happy to take any questions.
I'll let you go first, Bob.
Thank you for the report. My one question you just put up on the screen there was the timescale. I would have thought it would have gone to all of the planning committees and the people that are on those planning committees for comment, because they are the people that are there on the floor looking at the planning on every day.
It has been heavily consulted with the planning internal planners, including spatial planning and development management, and they have signed off on it as being the document that is needed to help support the process that they go through.
But we can make sure as part of the consultation process that it's sent to all the leads of the different planning committees, if that's what you're asking for. So we'll make sure it goes out to them as well as part of the consultation.
Councillor Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering how this works with the new local plan that's coming along, but just seems to get kicked into the distance each time. Also, I noticed on the picture that you've got, the graphic with a neighbourhood planning, there's a rather interesting looking wind turbine. Hopefully that does show a change. But I wonder to what extent renewable energy provision plays a part in this. Thank you.
Well, Brian, sorry, I do take some issue with saying the local plan's just being kicked down the road. You know, we have done Reg 18. We are going to do Reg 19 this year. I think maybe there was an over-ambition of optimism when it came to the timetable, which was inherited. But you know, the idea it's been kicked down the road is rather to belittle the efforts that are going on to put what is an amazingly complex document together, and you know, in a changing scene, because of course, you know, government are changing literally every month, something that affects the local planning. So you know, just want to lay that one to rest. Sorry, now I've spent so long saying that I've forgotten exactly what it was that you asked about.
Well, if you go to the link between this document and the coming local plan, and the other point that I raised was the issue of renewables and how that's is that incorporated within this?
It complements
and specifically, I mentioned the issue of wind power.
It complements the local plan is land use, but this complements clearly. It's going to be a supplementary planning document, so therefore it fits in to the hierarchies that we have. I don't think the pictures are necessarily reflective of anything that could be or may not be in the local plan. I mean, clearly there are arguments over renewable energy and the degree to which it's guided by the local plan, but I don't think this has any specific impact on that. This is about built environment. You want to say any more?
No, this aligns with, as I say, the 10 characteristics. It doesn't go into specifics and details. It's not aiming to replace or cover individual detailed topics such as wind farms, solar farms, battery storage, any of those items. They need to be specific policies within the local plan itself. this talks about getting good quality design that reflects local vernacular and considers all of the things around transport, linkages. We had earlier on about a development that come forward without a link to a sort of cycling network. It's to ensure that those linkages go right the way across good design. So one development links with another development and you get those full cycle networks rather than a stunted, short path that goes nowhere. So this is actually putting those principles of good design right at the forefront. And this is the document that helps guide that and which will help our urban designers, when considering an application, defend it if necessary at appeal as well.
Councillor Merry?
So, Chair, so yeah, a few points. I think just to quickly follow up on Councillor Matthews' point, though, you know, where you've got retrofit of panels into listed buildings, for instance, there was one came up in Chippenham, but it was done very, very sensitively and it was removable and there were conditions about replacing slates when they were panels were removed, etc. So that seems, I don't know if he's got permission now, but it was certainly supported by Chippenham Town Council. So things like that, you could have a bit, because I think the conservation officer was kind of ambivalent, like, you know, on the one hand, protecting our buildings, on the other hand, we've got these policies on renewables. This kind of works, but there wasn't any design guidance on it. So there are some areas, I think, where the local plan policy, you know, is going to look to the guidance for the detail, and they're kind of the wrong way around, but maybe they can be adjusted when it's reviewed, I don't know. The other thing was, as a chair of a neighbourhood plan, we're very conscious that we've come up with a design guide ahead of the Wiltshire one, and I'm hoping that it's all about local and detail, and it kind of sits under the Wiltshire one because that's more a county-wide thing, so there shouldn't be any conflict, but I just thought there could be conflicts between local plan design guides and Wiltshire's and how you might deal with that. And then there were just some specifics, 523 in particular about, because you mentioned cycle networks and it is really important. So it talks about, where is it? Was it 5? Oh, computer's just, screen's gone blank again. Where are we? 5.2.3, let me just put it back in and find the reference, sorry, 5.2.3.
Would you like us to read it out for you?
No, I'm there now. New developments provide walking and cycling connections within the site and between the site and the existing network. So this is a problem because the connecting to the, well, first of all, quite often the infrastructure that's needed to connect the site up is quite large, and the developer is going to push back against providing all of that. So it maybe needs to mention contributions too, I don't know, maybe that's going overly practical. But the big thing is that very often there isn't an existing network. So it's got to say something about contributing to developing the emerging network, as the LC whips have indicated, because we've already had pushback, as I pointed out earlier in the meeting, from a developer saying, you haven't got any plan here, there's no design for a cycle scheme, there is no existing network, why should we pay anything? And it's very difficult for the transport people to really force that, unless we've got a bit more guidance saying, yeah, these are emerging networks and you need to contribute to it, because it's chicken and egg, isn't it? There was also about on the 948 about cycle storage. It'd be good to mention oversized bikes, because you know a lot of people are trading in their car for something they can carry the family around in, and it doesn't fit into the normal cycle rack structure. And then on the charge points in our neighbourhood plan Chippenham, we put a condition about making sure they were at a level that was met with the Equality Act. You know, it was accessible, and also having at least one socket on the charge point per drive vehicle space on the drive. So if you've got two vehicles catered for, you want to have two sockets because they may both need to charge overnight. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Can I come back on that? I mean, I just think that this is all about setting expectations, and I think you know what we're trying to avoid is piecemeal developments that don't relate to anything that's there at the moment. We've all seen them, the sort of cookie cutter type field developments. And this is about saying, actually, that's not good enough. You've got to integrate with the, you know, the streetscape, the walking routes, the cycle routes, etc. Now, clearly, if there isn't a cycle route in this area and there isn't one planned, well, we can't really say they've got to produce a cycle route. And, it's almost like the reverse of what I've just been saying we're trying to avoid, which is producing something, that doesn't relate to anything else. So I'm not sure this is the place to put it, but clearly if there is an emerging cycle route that's coming, it'd be foolish not to take that into account. And that's something that, when you talk to developers about their obligations and things, clearly is going to be raised. I'm not sure it needs to be. The key point for the design guide is we expect these things to be joined up. We don't expect them to be in isolation and piecemeal. We expect them to be joined up. And that's what I think this is saying. So I think that's to agree with you, basically, but just to say that, this is not the place to say to a developer, you will, put this into this standard, irrespective of what is around.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I think I'll send you the specific example we've got because it's really frustrating because we've got an LC whip and an emerging cycle route, but because there isn't a kind of design there or an existing route, the developer claims and the transport officers agree that you can't sort of force that S106. So we do need to step up somehow to make it happen. Otherwise, that's going to happen every time.
Yeah. That's not down to this sort of thing, though. That's down to other. Yeah.
Councillor Trotman.
Thank you. As sort of chairman of the Northern Area Planning Committee, I welcome this. This is absolutely brilliant. We should have done this years ago. We've been forced into larger developers just placing houses of a style to their requirement. And of course, Core Policy 57 is very subjective, whether it can be used to either permit or to object to. So we'd have some guidelines here with the sort of design that we would embrace, on a reserved matters issue rather than the sort of outline, which is always going to be the difficulty. Obviously, the developers are going to sort of kick off a little bit. It's a lot more work they've got to do. But I see examples where we have 2 or 3 developers working within a town area that have a different style anyway, which is quite good. So we're not getting we're getting a mixture rather than not. But to bring Nick's point in about connectivity, we always kick off about this again, whereas developers put in for an application, it's permitted, another one comes in, but there's a different time rate, and suddenly there is no connectivity, and that has to be altered. We've got 3 sites in Cairn that do not connect together. It's ridiculous. And also when we come back to trying to allow this through Section 106, which is only site specific, we're having to use SIL or other Section 106 or legal agreements to try and sort of knock their heads together to get control of it. But without a doubt, brilliant paper. Pity this didn't come in years ago, but I can see the point. So consultation, you say, is coming in soon in May and probably in place by October. That seems. Is that
June, July consultation? June, July.
June, July. Okay. So October we should be managing that presumably. Yep. Yeah.
The timetable up in front of me, but I think what's the time
Yeah,
we're expecting to go through?
So depending on the level and number of alterations or comments that come back, and we have to take this into consideration as it's going to be a supplementary plan document, it's a statutory consultation process. We have to actually address every single comment or consider every comment. It may not be applicable and we may have a reason for not incorporating the change. So the timetable at the moment is to bring it to October Cabinet and full council after that.
I suppose one point is the fact that some developments are happening outside the town boundaries, as we know, which don't have any correlation to the inner part of the towns, the market towns especially, which you show on some of the photographs here. So the difficulty is trying to sort of hold back on the developers to make sure the design is working its way towards a recognisable issue for that particular town, with its vernacular and everything. So, it's good. Thank you for this. I'm really supportive of it.
Okay, councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be glad to hear mine's a very, very quick and simple question. In the same vein as Bob's question, would it be possible, please, to invite parish and town councils to be consultees on this? Because being on a town council planning committee, if they don't get asked, they'll be very upset by it, and there might be some good responses come back from them. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the best answer today. Keep them to that. Councillor Rounds, Tom, and then you, Tony.
Thanks, Joe. Actually, I as someone that chaired a neighbourhood planning steering group to fruition, I have to say that this document is extraordinarily welcome, and it was one of the issues that hampered us when we were coming to completing the neighbourhood plan, was that there was no guidance within the county to not necessarily force, but to guide developers along the lines of this document now will provide for us. And I have to say it is absolutely welcome. And I'm sure towns that are in the process of formulating their own neighbourhood plans will welcome this document very, very much so. And actually, Nick, if I could just say that your concerns, I think, is probably rightly addressed in the neighbourhood planning process in terms of connectivity and all the other issues you were worried about. Thank you anyway.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. A number of developers, we can all think of them, Redrow, Persimmon, have a portfolio of nationally designed houses. You can get a catalogue, you know, here's the Buckingham, here's the Windsor, here's the... thank you. So I just wonder whether your consultation will include consultation with developers. Thank you, Chair.
I think it has to.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Another good answer. And not to leave you out, Councillor McClelland, no references to Greece or even Burnley at the moment. So you can go last.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, first of all, going back to the original statement by Councillor Matthew, I fully agree with you. The local plan is doing us all down. And no matter what you say, Nick, it must be about 4 years ago, we hired a director of planning because corporate man Cunningham had not got the local plan in place and updated it. And he's come and gone. We're no further forward. We are all at the mercy of developers who just see it as an open gateway to whatever they can do. And if we don't like it locally, they can go to the government and take it on from there. And we are powerless. So your local plan needs doing, and needs doing much more rapidly than this council seems to plan for. Sorry to down you there. In terms of the actual document, I think it's a lovely document and contains all the nice things that we would want as a council. But going on from Tony Jackson, along comes the developer, and after 28 years of having a small parish of about 1,400 houses, I now live in a parish of about 5,000 houses. So I've seen every major developer, every land promoting company who do things slightly differently. And without a shadow of a doubt, they take whatever the council has got and either put in the Windsors and the Buckinghams or whatever and say, oh, it meets all of those things, or they look at the odd brick somewhere and think, yeah, we want to use this brick. Have they got it anywhere in that location? Oh, yeah, there's one. Okay, well, we've looked at the area and found that this is a local brick you use, so we're going to use it too. So everything that you write here can be looked at and either used in evidence to say they've met it, or if they don't like it and we try and react against it because we want it, then they cite national policy and get over it that way, government policy. So in not one instance have I ever come across a developer not getting what they want and even changing agreed plans as they go along when they want to change things. So that doesn't try and devalue your document. It's just a fact of life. I think this is an essential document to get something different started. So, that's my positive view of it. We need this document. However, it has to be somehow, not this document is there for discussion, and as you say, it is the point of going out for consultation, but it has to somehow translate into every policy that this council has, and it has to be either in line with a government policy or change government policy, or it's a pointless exercise because those developers will ride roughshod through everything. So I support it fully, but it's a meaningless document until we get some practicalities into the system. And I think my only question would be how are we going to do that so it can't outgun national policy, but it can have a distinct effect on these developers in some way. In terms of joined up footpaths and cycleways and stuff, the reality of that is these people have a site, and if there's a path over there, yeah, they can join up to it if you let them, although usually there's a metre or so ransom strip around it, so they say they can't join it because there's a big hole in the middle that the landowner still owns. And outside of that, outside of their development, even if they can get across the ransom strip, often it's different ownerships all the way along somewhere, and that prevents the council doing things. So it's not a matter of will from the council or yourselves. It is just the facts of life that this land is owned by people that sometimes don't want to play with you. And so going back to the basic question, Nick and team, how can the good parts of this get into our policies on a rapid basis and have an effect? Thank you.
I'm going to start with a sort of little bit of a story, I suppose. Because it's no secret to some people in this room that I've been involved in planning and working with developers for many years, and actually did a similar job to what I'm doing for this council now, for another council 10 years back. And I think the most disappointing change that I've encountered is 10, 15 years back, the developers would come to see the council and they'd sit down with the leader and the person covering planning and things like that, and they'd say, what are you going to allow us to do? Well, we want to do 8 stories. Well, you're not. You're going to do 6. Okay, we'll do 6. And they would actually, if you didn't like what they came up with, you could say, well, you can talk all you want. You're not going to get permission in this borough. So, go to Kingston or somewhere like that. And that dynamic has been changed. And I suspect it's been changed by a couple of things. One, the presumption of sustainable development, which means that, if they get turned down, they just go to appeal and they win on appeal. 5-year land supply clearly is a massive issue here. But the developers have got, in their own minds over the years, cockier and cockier about, because they've just managed to get more and more effective power. And so I see all of these things as trying to take a bit of that power back. So we've got things like the design guide. So, we can actually say there's no excuse for you coming up with your hyacinth bucket model number 278 that you roll out all over the country. We are saying this is what we want. You've got the changes to the MPPF that were consulted upon, which, if we are right in our thinking, means that Wiltshire will regain control and won't be terrorised by the impact of the 5-year land supply to the degree that it has been recently. And, fully accept that that's a position that, people say, well, can you get out of it? What's your strategy for getting out of it? Well, there wasn't, because you can't. That's the whole point of it. But the changes they're proposing now do mean that we're, done Reg 18, we should be only 4 years if they stick with the proposal that's been consulted on. Once we've got the plan in place, you won't have any 5-year land supply for 5 years. You've then got to produce another plan, so it's going to be a constant Forth Bridge sort of operation, but we should be safe. I think, and plus the market, of course, at the moment, I think this puts the boot back on us to some degree. And I think we should be able to have much more influence at the pre-planning stage. By the time it's got to planning application, it's too late. You can't influence it. I'm talking about the stage when these things come forward as concepts. I think we should be in a much stronger position. So I'm afraid I don't take the negative view that we're all going to hell in a handcart and we can't do anything. I think we can. I think we will be in a much better position. The local plan is progressing. I agree it was delayed by 6 months, but it was not feasible to deliver it in that stage. And anyone who says that you can just cut out various bits of it, ignore evidence and not respond to changes that are happening all around you, I'm afraid it'd just get thrown out by an inspector. So we really would be back to square one. So, we do have to take these things seriously. This is real stuff. And, I'm convinced that we now have a realistic plan for delivering on the local plan. And, you will be getting a draft this summer. That is our intention. And unless the world blows up in the meantime, that's what we're aiming to do. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, that I think we are going to be in different territory. I think this does help. And I think, I think the more we can nail down the parameters like this does, then the more we will end up with development that is more acceptable to residents. It'll never be totally acceptable, I fully understand that, but more acceptable to residents, more beauty, and more interfunctionality, which you were raising earlier. So I think, of course, this won't do it all on its own, but I do think we're moving towards a better situation.
Just a quickie back then, Ian.
That was the same question. The question was how can this get into policy? Because this in itself won't do anything with developers. How can it be moved into actual Wiltshire Council policies in planning terms and neighbourhood plans?
Once it's a supplementary planning document, it will have weight. It will have considerable weight as a supplementary, down from national legislation and MPPF and our local plan. This is is there.
Okay, right, I'm going to wrap this up. Just one comment. If are you referring to cycle paths not joining up and things? A lot of that's to do with the fact that, so Nick owns that piece of land halfway up to there and I own this half, Ransom Strip. They always keep that bit because there's always that chance they can get a 30 or 40% uplift in the value of the land. That's the crafty way they do it, to try and make money or try to protect themselves. I've had it happen in my village a few times. The other thing I just want to comment on very quickly, I did see a programme in Algeria where they built a new town. And do you know, they actually built the pipes, the cables and everything on the side of the road. Yet our developers are still putting it in a flaming road, so no scenery. If you've got a new estate, dig the road up and do the fixtures. Can't we get them to put it on the side of the road so they haven't got to do that anymore and it keeps the roads like a carpet? If you can do that, that'd be lovely.
It's a very good point, and we will take that one away. I mean, it does happen in some places. The City of London does put all its stuff in conduits and things like that. But yeah, I agree.
Nope. You don't put your carpet down.
But I also suspect the French have, the Algerians have the French system of deciding on development, and that is, it is decided, and that is what happens. There's none of this consulting or going back to this and that, and opening it up to everybody and local councils. That's it. It happens. Now, beware what you wish for.
It's just I was watching a documentary. I thought, I mean, what a good idea. But anyway, they thought of it first. Anyway, Barnabas, did you Very quiet today, Barbara.
No, just on your last point that you made, the powers that developers have on delivering housing in this country is nothing compared to the powers that utilities have over use of the roads. The legislation is heavily on their side. They have complete access, in my opinion.
Because they're all nationalised industries, isn't they? All got
And
superpowers.
yeah, and putting services outside the road is quite costly in some ways for them, so it's difficult to achieve.
We'll have solar power only then, so they can't even build any cables. Right, okay. Nick, and I'm going to finish. I'm going to
That's okay. I just wanted to say at the end of all that, though, I think that we all welcome this. It's really good work, and it's good that we're doing it. Thank you.
Right. So 3 recommendations. A, endorse the draft Wiltshire Design Guide ahead of public consultation in the early summer. And then B, to note the timeline for the public consultation and the process by which the comments will be considered ahead of the design guide being formally adopted as a supplementary planning document. And C, request that the design guide is also sent to the council's planning committees and parish and town councils for comment as part of the consultation process. We managed to encapsulate everything there. Proposed by Tony and Nick, I'll take you as a second. All in favour of that? Well done, thank you, and thank you for coming late, Nick, and thank you for you. Forward plan. It's attached on pages 211 and 218. Can I invite any comments on that plan? Hopefully not. Oh, Councillor Jackson. Yes, of course you can.
Thank you, Chair. It's the update on the town's programme app development, which we're not due to hear about until November. My view is that this is something that we need to focus on a bit more sharply, and I welcome the opportunity, if it were possible, to know about it sooner and possibly even get a briefing on it.
Would you like me to see if we can get on the agenda for the next meeting in June? Or Parvis? Would you, an update for June? We'll put that on the agenda for June then, for an update then, okay? All right, anyone else? No? So I'm not aware of any urgent items, so I'm going to move to close the meeting. And the next meeting is on the 6th of June. And I close this meeting at 17 minutes past 5, so I've lost a whole half of football. Right, thank you everybody for attending. It's been a very good meeting. It's been very important.